A proportion is an equation stating that two ratios are equal. So it's just a statement, all right, that states that two ratios are equal. And it can be written in two ways. For example, it can be written as ratio, like what I have here. Okay, so this is a proportion, or it can be written as a fraction, what I have here. Okay, this is also a proportion. Now I want you to just pay attention to something here. If you notice, and I'll focus on this fraction. Notice that 3 times 30 is equal to 5 multiplied by 18. Okay, if I multiply this by that and that by that, you can see that, and that's what's called cross multiplying. If I multiply 3 by 30 and 5 by 18, we notice that this will be equal to 900, and that will be equal to 900 as well. So when two ratios, we can conclude and say that when two ratios are equal, then the cross products of the ratios are equal. Okay, these guys here are what we call cross products. So we can say that when two ratios are equal, then the cross products of the ratios are equal. Okay, so this is important, and we'll use this later on. Now I just want to look at some examples of proportions. Find the missing number in each proportion. Now what we have to do is, we know that a proportion is a statement that states that two ratios are equal, which means these two ratios have to be equal. So just by inspection, you can actually find the missing number. We know that to move from 4 to 2, you divide by 2. So which means for me to move from here to here, I'll divide by 2 as well. And I know that 18 divided by 2 will be 9. So that will just be 9. The same thing here. To move from 39 to 3, you divide by 3, which means here we are going to divide by 3 as well. And what you end up with is 10. And the last one here, to move from 4 to 20, you multiply by 5, which means if I multiply by 5 here, I should be able to end up with what's missing there. So you can just use the idea of equality of two ratios to be able to find the missing number. Example 2, the ratio of squash to water in a drink is 3 to 8. How much squash is used with 4 liters of water? So what we need to do here is, we need to form a ratio and try to solve that ratio. Okay, so we know that squash to water, so squash to water is 3 to 8. But I have 4 liters of water, so which means that squash to 4 liters of water should be equal to 3 to 8. And by inspection, we can find the missing number. So we know that to move from 8 to 4, you divide by 2. You divide by 2, which means to move from here to here, I'll have to divide by 2 as well. Okay? Now, which means 3 divided by 2 will be 1.5, which means we need 1.5 liters of squash. In part B, Sue invested money in stocks, bonds, and property in the ratio 6 to 4 to 5. If she invested $36,000 in property, how much did she invest in the other two areas? So we can go ahead and say stocks to bonds to property, stocks to bonds to property is equal to 6 to 4 to 5. And we know how much this person has invested in property, so we can say stocks to bonds to property, and I'm just going to replace that with what she invested, which was that $6,000 is equals to 6 to 4 to 5. And now what I'm going to do here is to try and just by inspection try to figure out what this person invested in each of this. It's basically working backwards. What would you multiply by 5 to get that 6,000? So you can just go ahead. The opposite of multiplying is dividing, so you can do 36,000 divided by 5, and you get it's 7,200. So which means you have to multiply this by 7,200. We might have to multiply 5 by 7,200 to get that 6,000. And because these ratios are equal, we are going to do the same thing to each of the these guys here, stocks and bonds, to find what they are, because we know how many parts each of them represent. So for stocks, we'll just multiply. Remember, we multiplied 5 by 7,200 to get that 6,000. So we'll multiply 6 by 7,200 to get 43,200. And for bonds, we'll multiply 4 by 7,200 to get 28,800. Okay, and remember these are dollars. Example 3, here is a list of ingredients for making 4 pancakes. So 6 dessert spoons of flour, a quarter liter of milk, 1 pinch of salt, and an egg. You want to make 10 pancakes. How much flour will you need? So you can go ahead and form an equation. Remember, we are trying to apply proportion. So for 4 pancakes, so 4 pancakes to 10 pancakes. So this is basically the ratio of what's going to happen. Initially, you are making 4 pancakes, but now you want to make 10 pancakes. And the ratios of each of these ingredients should be equal. And that's why you're using that to form a proportion, to equate two ratios, because you know that these ingredients should be proportional. So you can go ahead and say, remember here we're focusing on flour, so 4 to 10 will be equal to flour, you need 6 dessert spoonfuls of flour, but if you're making, you need 6 if you're making 4 pancakes, right? So you need 6 if you're making 4 pancakes, but for 10 we don't know how many spoonfuls of flour you need. So what I'm going to do is I'll just put an X there, and then what I'll do is I'll form an equation out of this. Remember, you can write proportions as fractions, or you can write proportions as ratios. So you can go ahead and say x over 6 will be equal to 10 over 4. And the opposite of dividing by 6 is multiplying, so you can say x will be 10 over 4 multiplied by 6, which will be equal to 15. So what we need is 15 desert uh, desert spoons of flour. So 15 spoons of flour. Okay. And you can use the same method for milk. So you can just form an equation. So 4 to 10 will be equal to how many liters of milk? A quarter to x. And then what I'm going to do is just form an equation. Remember, a quarter is same as 0.25. So you can go ahead and say x over 0.25 will be equal to 10 over 4, which means that x will be equal to 10 over 4 multiplied by 0.25, which will be equal to 0.625. Okay, so you can say this will be liters. So we basically need 0.625 liters of milk to make 10 pancakes.